Daf Kuf Hey Amud Aleph will begin Kuf Dalet Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. We were holding with Shmuel's halach. The Shmuel said that even though something which is tomei betumas sheretz is chayiv if someone brings it into the base of Mikdash, but a dead sheretz itself, there's no chiyuv if one brings it into the base of Mikdash. So Zok the Gemara, Elakana Tanoi. We previously attempted to prove that this was the Machlokes Tanoi in our Mishnah, which we dispelled that. Now we say Elakana Tanoi. That Shmuel's halacha is based as a Machlokes of the following Tanoi. That's not. We learned in our Mishnah, in the Seifa, the Mishnah we say Mehechen, or the also the Mishnah we learn Mehechen Matzinoi. So if there's a dead sheretz in the base of Mikdash on Shabbos, where do you remove it from? So there's a machlokes, do you remove it from the Azara or not? Is it removed also from the Azara? So, let us say that this is the machlokes, this is the basis of the machlokes. Taman, the Amar Ma'azara Laura Shimon ben Nanas, who says you do not remove it from the Azara. Why not? Because Kasavar Hamach Nesheretz L'Mikdash Potter. Because there's no chiyuv if you brought the dead sheretz into the base of Mikdash. In any event, there's no chiyuv. Meaning it's only an inyan of kavod, and therefore, Mishum Kavod Shechina, you remove it from the Kodesh Kadoshim, you remove it from the Ulam Mizbeach, from these places, from the Ulam, you remove it from the places that have greater Kedusha. But from the Azora, which is somewhat of a lesser Kivyachal area of Kedusha, then there we say, Mishum Kavod, you're not Mechuyev, and therefore the Isser of Muksa, we keep the Isra Muksa in place. But there's no Chiyuv. So therefore, essentially, there's no Chiyuv, is Machnis Sheretz L'Mikdash Potter. It's not only an Inyan Mishum Kavod, therefore we say in the Azora, don't remove it. Put over a copper keli to cover it. Umanda Amra Mikula Azora, and a Rekiva says, no, you remove it even from the Azora, because Savar Chayev. He holds there's a Chiyuv for bringing a dead Sheretz in the Mikdash, and therefore it has to be removed from the Azora as well. Now the Gemara says, no. That's not the basis of the machlokes. Really, I'll tell you that that's not the basis of the machlokes. And they both hold that you're chayev for bringing in a dead sheretz in the base of Mikdash. But the machlokes is based on follows. That they hold that Amar Rav Yochanan says, Ushnei mikra echad darsh. Whether you remove it from the Azora or not, is depending on how we darshan interpret the following pasuk. The following pasuk talks about the time of Chizkiyahu Melech. Then when Chizkiyahu Melech, the tzaddik, he removed the Avodah Zarah that his father Achaz had placed in the base of Mikdash. The Gemara in Shabbos, the Mishnah in Shabbos says that the Avodah Zarah is matama kimes, and therefore it's matama ba'oya. So it had to be removed from the Avodah Zarah. It had to be, of course, removed from the base of Mikdash, but there's also a Tumah consideration. So the pasuk says as follows. It says, "Vayavoy Kohanim lepenima beis Hashem l'tayar." The Kohanim came into the interior of the base of Mikdash to be matarid. Vayetziu is called Atuma Asher Motza Behechel Hashem l'chaltza beis Hashem, and they removed all the Tumah that was in the base of Mikdash, and they brought it into the Azara. And then the Leviim accepted it, took it from the Kohanim, and the Leviim removed it from outside the Azora into Nachal Kidron. So we see that there's a transition in the Azora. It was transferred from the Kohanim to the Leviim. Mar Savra Midishtana Bazor B'Leviim, Rav Shimon ben Nanas hold that since there was a transition in the Azora from the Kohanim to the Leviim, since it was transferred to the Leviim, Tumah Bazar Leka, therefore, there's no Tumah in the Azar. What does that mean? Meaning, what we're understanding this way is that everyone agrees, perhaps it's not like that to bring in the dead sheretz into the base of Mikdash is chayv. The question is how far does it have to be removed? So Rav Shimon ben Nanas holds, you see that since it was transferred from the Kohanim to Leviim, therefore that means that the presence of the tomb of the dead sheretz, or the Avodah Zarah, the presence of it in the Azora is not so chomer, meaning the removal of it is not that critical. We're not talking about bringing it in, we're talking about removing it. And therefore, just like we say that the Kahanim, we're not Matama the Kahanim in the Azara, and it's more severe to be Matama, even though Levim who are Tomei, anyone was Tomei in the Azara Chayiv, but here it was necessary to remove the Tumah, to remove it from the base of Megdash. But since it's more severe to have Kahanim who are Tomei, because they might do Chas v'Shalom, do the Avodah B'Tumah, so that's the equivalent of a Tumah D'Rabbanan of Muksa, of having Muksa in the Azara. So therefore we transfer to the Leviim. Now, even though they're both not allowed to be Tomei in the Beis HaMikdash, for the purpose of removal, it's allowed, but we now transfer it to the Leviim because there's more of a inyan not to have the Kahanim Tomei, because they might come to do the Avodah B'Tumah. So we transfer it to the Leviim. Similarly, he will hold that we will not override the Isra of Muksa to remove the dead sherets from the Azara. Umar Savar and Rabbi Kiva holds on no, it doesn't indicate that there is a lesser inyan that of removal of the tumah from the Azara. It's simply that, practically speaking, we would always use the Leviim, but you can't use the Leviim in the inner areas because the Leviim are not allowed to come in the area Bein Ulam Lemizbeach, or in the Kadosh Kadoshim. Umar Savar Mafke Kahanim. So in those areas where Kahanim can be there, now even Kahanim can only be there to do the Avodah, only to do the Avodah, but you could have Kahanim over there for when they do the Avodah, so Mafke Kahanim. But Hashta Davsha B'Levim Tzolei Matam Kahanim. But here on the Azar, where Levim are allowed to be present, we're not Matam the Kahanim, so we have no raya to Shmuel's din. So we're talking now about the removal from the Azara. Now we talk about the priority of people who have to come in to do repairs to the base of Mikdash. What is the priority? Who goes in? Who's allowed to go in to do these things? Tan Rabbana. Anyone can come in if it's needed. Now, even though we can't come in unnecessarily to the base of Mikdash, but if it's for the purpose of building or repairing or removing the Tumah, then they can come in. Umitzvah b'kahanim, but it should be preferably done with the Kahanim. They should do these things. You mentioned Kahanim, nichnasim Levim. If there's no Kahanim, the Levim come to do it. And ein sham Leviim, if you don't have Leviim, nechnasim Yisraelim, meaning those areas that have greater kedusha. So you're coming into the Heichal, the areas those should come in preferably by the Kahanim. If there's no Kahanim, Leviim, if no Leviim, Yisraelim. But in any event that they, if need be, they can do it. But in all these classes of people, we're mater only the Taharim and not the Tmeim. They're only mater the Taharim and not the Tmeim. So the Gan Yaakov says, so therefore, a Tor Yisrael takes precedence over a Tomei Kohen. But if there's no one else available, then if there's only Tameim, then a Tomei, if it's only a Tomei to do it, then even a Tomei Yisrael is allowed to do it. But if you have Tahirim, what we mean to say is that Tahirim takes precedence. That takes the precedence over all. So if you have even a Yisrael is Tor and a Kohen, the only Kohen you have is Tomei, the Yisrael therefore does it. Rav Huna, Rav Kahana, who was a Kohen, Messiah Kahani, he brings a raya to, he supports the Kahanim. He was a Kohen. We see over here that he takes precedence, he gives precedence rather to Kahanim. The son of Kahana, whenever the Pasuk says, that he shouldn't come, shouldn't come to the Mizbeach. And the Kohen that has a mum, he should not come to the curtain. So you might think, therefore, a Kohen is a Balmum, he can't even come into the area between the Ulam and Mizbeach. He might think even Lasas Rikuya Pachim, even to make repairs or to make the golden plates where that have the interior of the walls of the Kadosh Kadoshim. Tam Loimer Ach Chalek. It says Ach ala Parach Layah. It's Machalik. That even though he can't come in to do the Avodah, and therefore he can't come in unnecessarily, and he can't come in to do the Avodah, But to do repairs, cholak, he could do it. Mitzvah, the mitzvah is to do it with a kohen who is a Tommy, does not have a mum. And sham tmimim nichnasim balei mum. If there's no tmim, then a balei mum can do it. Mitzvah b'tayir, mein sham tahirim nichnasim tmeim. And if there's no tahirim, even one who is Tomei, even a kohen who is Tomei can do it. But idividi kohanim in Yisraelim loy, but in any event, it's only Kohanim and not Yisrael. This argues on the previous brisa that we had that said that Yisrael could do it. Here, Rav Kahana is saying it's dafka Kohanim. We have the following shayla: Tomei ubal mum. If you have a Tomei or Balmum, Ezamem Nichnas, which takes priority? Now, both of them have a chasar. Tomei can't do the avoida, and a Balmum can't do the avoida. Which one should take priority to do the repairs? Rav Chia Barashi Amarav, he says Tomei Nichnas, it's a Tomei. Why? Because we do find exceptions by Tuma Tumuhutra B'tzibur, and therefore, if there is the Tzibur is Tomei, a kohen who's Tomei can do the avodah. So we see there's an exception. Rabbi Elazar Omer Balmum Nichnas, he says no. Rather, the Balmum should be Nichta Ishtari B'Achilas Kachim, because the Balmum is mutter to eat the kachim. He can't do the avodah, but he's allowed to eat the kachim. Mashen can, the Tomei cannot. So you see that he has more shaychus to the kaidish, to the kachim. So that's the machlekes. There's a general machlekes between the Rambam and the Ramban that we say over here. It says a mitzvah b'tmimim ein sham tmimim l'chanasim balei mum. The balei mum can come in. Is there, now of course there's an isser for balei mumim to do the avodah. Is there an isser, however, for the balei mumim to come into the Beis HaMikdash? The Rambam says, we see over here, that a balmum cannot come into the Beis HaMikdash. He can't even come into the Beis HaMikdash. That's why we have this special limud. Rav Kahana has a special limud to be matim to do repairs. The Ramban says there's no special isser for a kohen who's a balmum to come in to the Beis HaMikdash. There's no special isser. Any kohen who is not coming in to do the avodah, the pasuk says, even a kohen who's tor and a tomim does not have a mum can't come in unnecessarily. The special heter that we have over here is only to be mater the kohen who's a balmum. He's not coming in to do the avodah. He can't do the avodah. So therefore we need a special heter for him to do the repairs. Rav Shimon Omer, the Sefer of the Mishnah now brings two cases which seem unrelated to our discussion, which are really related to what was learned earlier in the Masechta. So, what is Rav Shimon referring to? The Gemara says, Hasam Kai. It's referring to what we learned earlier. That's not we learned in the Mishnah earlier. Someone who came out, or we went past the Tchum. And he was outside the Tchum, it's dark, he's outside the Tchum. Even if it's one amma, he's beyond the Tchum, even one amma, he cannot go in. He's outside his Tchum area, he can't come in. But Rav Shimon, Rav Shimon says, even 15 ammas outside where they marked the Tchum, where they marked the boundary for the 2,000 ammas, he can go in. Why is that? The surveyors, when they put the markers, they don't give the full midah, they don't give the full measure of the alpine mama. Why is that? Because those who make mistakes, meaning they intentionally put the marker 15 ammas closer to where than it should be, and you really have an extra 15 ammas. Rashi has two pshatim. One pshat is that because the surveyors sometimes make mistakes, so to give that allowance, they bring it in earlier. The second pshat Rashi says is in the case of a person, like this scenario over here, a person happens to be outside the tchum, they give it an allowance so that the person should not be stuck out there. So they do that b'mnei time. The Kama says you cannot go in, and he said that you could go in. So therefore he says it's really not, we're not being makel with it. He said that it's really, the measurement is that it's really allowed mikar din because they intentionally put the markers that much closer. Now, the second part of what he says is another unrelated halacha. What they were matir, these that they were matir for you in the Beis Hamikdash, these things that they're matir in the Beis Hamikdash, they're only matir shvus, the rabbanan. They're not matir the raisa. So therefore, Taisus explains that really this following halacha that Rav Shimon says really should be listed earlier in the Mishnah where this halacha is brought down on Kuf base. That's where it really should be brought down. However, we want to bring on we have all these discussions on all of these things in the Beis Hamikdash that we were making in the Beis Hamikdash. We now bring Rav Shimon at the end to say how he's interpreting what we're matter in the Beis Hamikdash and why this halacha, why he says the following halacha. So Zok the Gemara Hechikoi Hasam Koi is referring to what we learned earlier on Kuf Beis. The Kama Tanakama Kaisha says that if there's a broken string on one of the chords, one of the string in the harps is broken, Tanakama says you can tie it. Rav Shimon says you can't make a regular knot. You can't make a regular knot because you're not matir the rice in the Beis Hamikdash. You can only do a bow, which is a derabanan, and a derabanan we're matir in the Beis Hamikdash. Aniva deloy osli dechiv chatas sharle rabona. Rav Shimon says they're only matir an aniva, a bow which does not lead deloy osli dechiv chatas. That they're matir. I'm not going to read the very last line. We'll save the rest of for Sim. We'll just speak it out. Rav Shimon says now. Rav Shimon Zikr is saying that they're not matir the rice on the Beis Hamikdash. They're only matir the rabbanan. But the way the Meforshim understand it is as follows. He's saying even at the Rabbanan that were matir, we're only matir the Rabbanan that's not going to lead to the Raisa, but Aniva, so therefore, Aniva osli dechiv chatas, we're not concerned that will lead to the Raisa because Aniva, bow itself is the Rabbanan. And therefore, even if the person makes a Aniva, if you do an Aniva, it won't lead to a deraisa. But if he makes a kshir, if he makes a knot, it might lead him, even if he makes a kesher she'ena shel kayama, he might make a kesher shel kayama, and that would be an isser deraisa. So therefore, we would be geyser. We're geyser that you can't make, even in the Beis Hamikdash, don't make a knot, even a kesher she'ena shel kayama, because it might lead to doing a kesher shel kayama. Now Rashi says it might lead to a kesher shel kayama outside the Beis Hamikdash, which would be an Isser Deraisa, which implies that he holds like Rav Shimon, that he holds that he would hold rather that like Rabbi Eliezer, that Machshira Mitzvah that are Doichen Shabbos. And therefore, in the Beis Hamikdash, even a Kesher Kayama wouldn't be Aser. It's only in the Medina that it's Aser. On Kol Ponim, Rav Shimon is saying we don't allow a Kesher, even a Kesher Sha'ena Shel Kayama, because it might lead to an Isser Deraisa. We only allow a bow.